Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1024, and today's date is July 17th, 2016, and the title of the episode is The Current Economic Collapse News Brief. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. I place an interview on the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel. It is with Jason Burak, so you can go right over to that channel and play the interview, or you can come over to the x22report.com site, scroll down a little bit, look over to your right-hand side, you'll see the video there, or you can go to newssentinel.com. Same thing, scroll down a little bit, look over to the right-hand side, and you can play the interview there. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we realize things are really starting to accelerate at this point. We see the economy, it is coming down very, very quickly. The economic indicators are pointing to a deterioration of each economic sector, and it is not improving. We see that events around the world are accelerating. We're seeing false flags accelerate. And we know we just had that recent false flag in Nice, France, where they're saying this driver who was radicalized, who was part of the Islamic State. By the way, that whole story is falling apart. It's showing that he had nothing to do with the Islamic State. And what we're seeing right now is they're using whatever they possibly can, or they're creating these instances to try to scare more and more people. Now, out in France, we realize that Hollande was going to remove the state of emergency. Now, the state of emergency was in effect at this time, and it did absolutely nothing to help the situation. Because if we believe their official stories, each time these things happen, and each time they tell us, oh, we need to have this in place, oh, we need to have that in place, if you notice, none of it works. Now, this time they didn't use weapons because they were getting such a backlash of everyone saying, well, if there are terrorists out there, shouldn't we all have weapons? Shouldn't we protect ourselves? And I think this is why they're changing course at this point in time. But very interestingly, going back to November, during the Paris terrorist attack, the U.S. and the French decided, you know what? Let's start sharing our data. Let's enhance our security. They came together. They created this model to share all the information. And look, did it help? Once again, no. Because most of these occurrences, these events, are created by the governments, by the different agencies in each of these countries to scare the people into doing things they normally wouldn't do, and that is give up their rights. They're used to create more laws to take away rights. They're used to give more power to the government. That's it. Now, we see that the U.S. is in continuous talks with Russia, trying to iron out this deal that the U.S. has. And the question is, why is the U.S. proposing a deal out of thin air, just like they create currency? Well, one of the reasons is because their backs are against the wall. They lost their Islamic State proxy army. They lost the edge in Syria. They're losing, and they're having major problems in this area, and they're trying to keep their moderate forces intact. So they're making this deal to collaborate against the terrorist organizations. And part of the deal is that the Syrian Air Force, it will need to be grounded during this period of time, which is very interesting. So think about this. The U.S. is saying that the Syrian Air Force, which is the Air Force for the country, they are not allowed to fly their jets in their own country. It's like Mexico or Canada or any other country coming into the U.S. saying, listen, I know you have terrorists running around. There's many different factions in your country, but we don't want you to fly your jets in your own country to get them, which makes no sense whatsoever. And we know the U.S. is pushing this proposal for a different purpose. One, it could be to save face, because as we know, they're backed into a corner. Two, they already know that this proposal is going to go absolutely nowhere, because they're going to be demanding a lot and giving a little. First of all, they're in Syria illegally. They invaded a country, and they're pushing terms in this country. But we'll have to see how this turns out, and we'll have to watch this very carefully. Now, out in Turkey, we understand this coup took place. Now, in the beginning, it seemed like it was a grassroots coup. The people were rising up. But we come to find out this is not the case whatsoever. And what's very interesting is the U.S. came right out and said, we have no intelligence, no information about this upcoming coup. We had no clue whatsoever this was going to happen, which is a red flag right off the bat. First of all, if we believe them, you mean there's billions and billions of dollars they spend on surveillance, spying, and everything else is a complete waste of funds if they have no clue whatsoever. But of course they're out there saying this because there's something else going on. Now, right off the bat, we see that Erdogan has accused his arch enemy, Fethullah Gulen, who lives in Salisbury, Pennsylvania. And right off the bat, he said it had to be him. And he blamed the United States that they were part of this coup. Now, this is very interesting right off the bat. Now, of course, the United States, Secretary of State John Kerry, said the United States will help Turkey investigate a failed coup and invited Ankara to share any evidence it has against U.S.-based opposition figure Fethullah Gulen. Now, of course, the U.S. is saying, we had no part of this, we had no idea this was happening, and we can see the tensions between the U.S. and Turkey. They are escalating right now. The president came out, Obama, and said that all parties in Turkey should support the democratically elected government of Turkey. And when we look at this and we try to make sense of this, we see a lot of things happening right now. Now, right in the beginning, they shut down the Incirlik base, which holds about 80 U.S. nukes. They shut the power, they cut the power. And right now, we see that everything has been restored in that area. During this time, during the coup attempt, we see U.S. suspended all airstrikes from that base, but it looks like they're back on right now. But what's very interesting about this whole entire thing is that when they question the soldiers afterwards, the everyday soldier had no clue what was going on. They were told that this was a military exercise. They had no idea this was a coup that was happening. They had no idea that they were taking part in an attempt to topple the government. They realized it when people started climbing on the tanks. They started to realize what was going on at this point. Now, the entire thing seems highly dubious and very suspicious. Now, as we can see, Erdogan has remained in power. We might not know every single detail at this point. There's more information coming out at each time. But one of the takeaways from all of this is that Erdogan is still in power, and his grip on power was not weakened by the coup. Actually, it was strengthened. How was it strengthened? Well, he's beginning the purge. He's getting rid of generals. He's getting rid of judges. all those that he suspects are against him. But while this was going on, media organizations like Dogan and Hurriyet and others were still operating and putting out pro-Erdogan information, including updating their websites long after they were supposedly seized by the coup plotters. Now, this was a very strange coup. There were no apparent leaders. No one came forward to make statements to the public or to try to garner support. Quite clearly, even during the coup, what did we really see? We saw that they didn't accuse him of Erdogan of rigging elections, of accepting bribes, peddling ISIS stolen oil in partnership with his son. Actually, we've seen none of this. Actually, there was no leaders involved in this, which is very odd in itself. So, Turkey has accused the United States of an overt, egregious act of war. Now, considering the gravity of Turkey's accusations against the United States, its actions so far have been disproportionately subdued. Now, we're not suggesting that Turkey is going to go to war with the United States, but even amid diplomatic rows of far lesser significance, nations have expelled diplomats and withdrawn the use of their territory for specific uses by the nation in question. Turkey so far has done none of this in regards to the United States. Now, they believe the United States was behind this, but they have done nothing up to this point. So in the upcoming weeks, should Turkey fail to take even those most basic steps of removing those individuals in the country, maybe cutting access to their insular base, well, it might appear at that point that Turkey's accusations are a complete distraction. But we have to ask ourselves, a distraction from what? Well, we see that Turkey is purging. They've gotten rid of many of those people that were implicated in the failed coup. And we see arrests have risen to about 6,000. He's also gone in and gotten rid of about 2,700 judges. And we can see right now that he's giving himself more power. So if the world is expected to believe what happened in Turkey regarding the U.S. involvement in this recent coup, Turkey must, in the end, follow through in cutting off ties with the U.S. And we're going to have to watch this very carefully. Now, if Turkey does not expel U.S. forces, cuts off the insular base from the United States, we might have our answer here. The question is, what is that answer? The other question is, what about NATO? NATO did absolutely nothing. Turkey is part of NATO. They didn't come to Turkey's aid at that point. Actually, to Erdogan's aid at that point. They just watched from the sidelines. So, you expect, if this was a real coup, and the U.S. was really behind it, Turkey was going to now realign itself geopolitically. That means making closer ties maybe to Russia, Iran, and maybe they'd move away from what is happening in Syria. So if none of these changes take place, it would indicate before the entire world that the coup was staged with the help of the United States. It would remove the last remaining obstacle and allow Erdogan to gain absolute power over Turkey, remove those individuals that might oppose him for what is coming next. So let's take a look at this. Erdogan was on vacation in the south. The U.S. had no clue anything was going on. The individuals in the military had no idea what was going on. They thought it was a military drill. There were no leaders. There were no charges against Erdogan. Erdogan went on to the news and plead to the people and said, listen, take to the streets and stop the coup. Now, here in the U.S., the corporate media was pushing for Erdogan. And that's another red flag right there. So the military exits stage left. Erdogan takes center stage and goes after all of his enemies. So when we look at this, it seems like this was a complete setup. It was planned. And it's for another purpose. And that purpose is more power, maybe for the next phase of what's going on in Syria. And we're going to have to watch this very carefully, because we see things are in motion right now. They're preparing, getting ready. Now, very interestingly, Putin gave a call to Erdogan. He wants to meet with him. And they're going to meet the first week of August. So we're going to have to watch the situation. We have the United States right now talking to Russia, pushing a plan, demanding different things from Syria and Russia. The U.S. is backed in a corner. They're losing ground in Syria. The Islamic State is finished. We're seeing more false flags, blaming it on the Islamic State. The FBI, they're out there saying the Islamic State is on the run, and they're going to be creating more terrorist attacks, which seems ridiculous, because if their organization is being wiped out, what's the terrorist attack? What are the terror attacks going to do at this point? They only have 10% of the territory in Iraq. They're being beaten in Syria. The U.S. has no hopes at this point of getting Assad out of power. And the only alternative is to come up with a new plan. And this is something we're seeing form right now. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.